What's going on, everyone? D-Money here. Another Commander deck tech video. I know I said I was trying to make this semi-regularly, but I've had a lot going on in life. So yeah. I've also switched from Arc deck to Moxfield. I was having a lot of issues with Arc deck. Moxfield just looks cleaner. Linked to the actual deck as well as my Moxfield profile will be down in the description. Today, I'm bringing you my Obeka deck. The only deck I built off of Outlaws of Thunder Junction was the only one that really appealed to me. In any event, she is a 3/5 with Menace, and when she deals combat damage to a player, you get that many upkeep steps after this phase. Now, normally upkeep effects, fairly useful. Some of them can be pretty strong, but again, you only get one of them. There are ways to get other upkeep effects besides Obeka. I didn't put them in this deck because I didn't really feel like they were needed. But yeah, the idea here is, she's relatively hard to block because of Menace. She'll only generally be dealing 2 damage at a time unless I buff her up, which I do have ways to do that in here. The goal is not to kill with commander damage, but rather some insane upkeep triggers. So, starting here with the creatures, we have Baleful Force. At the beginning of each upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Now, I have to be careful with these kind of effects, because I can very easily either deck myself or kill myself. But I have some ways around it. But card draw is especially powerful. Getting up to 8 mana is a bit of a chore, but if the game moves on long enough where I'm able to start casting things like this, chances are I'm going to run away with the game. Got the Blood Tyrant. It's a 5/5 with flying and trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player loses a life. You put a +1/+1 counter on Blood Tyrant for each 1 life lost this way. Whenever a player loses a game, put a 5 +1/+1 counters on Blood Tyrant. Again, another way for me to potentially kill myself, but this thing will get super big if I get it down. And it's not even close. It'll be really hard to deal with. Good thing I can close the game out with. We got Blood Gift Demon. It's a 5/4 with flying at the beginning of your upkeep. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Again, another way to draw cards, lose a life. Pretty self-explanatory. And a 5/4 in the air is nothing to sneeze at. We got the Bone Horde Dracosaur. It's a 5/5 with flying and first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile a land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exile a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. So this is kind of ramp of sorts. It'll really thin out my deck in a hurry. This is something I'm still on the fence if I like it in here, because if I start taking too many upkeeps, I'm not going to be able to play a lot of the cards that I'm exiling. At least I get treasures and dino tokens, but yeah. We have the Caves of Chaos Adventurer. It's a 5/3 with trample. When it enters battlefield, you take the initiative. So this was a mechanic released in Commander Legends Battles Baldur's Gate. Basically, when you take the initiative at the beginning of your upkeep, you venture into the Undercity, which is one of those big dungeons. The reason why this is in here, venturing into the Undercity has a lot of really strong effects, and they trigger during my upkeep, provided I still have the initiative. You get the initiative back if you hit a player in combat, just like you do with the Monarch. So I can easily rip through the Undercity, and then once that happens, I have a couple other cards in here that synergize along with completing a dungeon, and yeah, pretty self-explanatory there too. Creeping Bloodsucker. So this one, pretty sure the only reason this is worth as much as it is now is because Obeka came out. Beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, gain life equal to the life or to the damage dealt this way. So on the surface, during my first upkeep, 1 life from each of my opponents, I gain 3 or 4 life, depending on how many people are in my pod. And if Obeka hits something, that life gain starts up. That's how I kind of offset the cards that make me lose life and draw cards. It's with cards like this that'll keep me alive. The Dragon Master Outcast. It's a 1/1. Beginning of your upkeep, if you control 6 or more lands, put a 5/5 dragon creature token flying onto the battlefield. One of the other problems this deck kind of has is dealing with flyers, and this helps me out immensely. Again, I have to get up to 6 lands, but if I hit that point, and I start pumping out this many dragon tokens, it's going to be real hard to deal with. You're going to have to board wipe me in a hurry or the game's over. Generous Plunderer. It is a 2/2 with menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a treasure token. When you do, target opponent creates a tapped treasure token. When Generous Plunderer attacks, it deals damage to the defending player equal to the amount of artifacts they control. Now, I'm not usually a huge fan of symmetrical effects like this. However, creating a ton of treasure is pretty handy. And then on top of that, whenever he attacks, if they don't use those treasures up in a hurry, he's going to be nuking them for the amount they have. This is another card that I'm still on the fence if I want to keep it in here, but for the time being, it seems pretty good. Indulgent Tormentor, 5/3 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. This is just golden with Obeka because I either get to draw a bunch of cards with no drawback, or I'm forcing my opponents to sack a bunch of creatures or pay life. Either way, I win. Magmatic Force. At the beginning of each upkeep, Magmatic Force deals 3 damage to any target. Lightning Bolt each upkeep, pretty self-explanatory. Another good way to kind of finish things off or take down problematic threats on the board. Ravenloft Adventurer, 3/4. When there's a battlefield, you take the initiative. If a creature an opponent controls would die, it's set exile and put a head counter on it. Whenever Ravenloft Adventurer attacks, if you complete a dungeon, defending player loses 1 life for each card they own in exile with a hit counter on it. So, if stuff's dying, it's getting exile. One of my favorite things to do, because things aren't hitting the graveyard, I don't have to worry about graveyard shenanigans. And honestly, if I've completed a dungeon, it's a little bit of extra life loss for my opponents. Pretty Gucci. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. It's a 3/1. May have Sakashima enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces' other abilities. The legend rule does not apply to permanents you control. This allows me to make him a copy of Obeka. More Obekas equals more upkeeps equals more fun. Enough said. Silent Arbiter. It's a 1/5. No more than 1 creature can attack each combat. No more than 1 creature can block each combat. This makes Obeka unblockable because she has menace, and your opponent will not be able to block her because they can't block with more than 1 creature. I have multiple things to make Obeka blockable in here as well. Skyline Despot. When there's a battlefield, you become the Monarch. Reminder on the Monarchs, I tend to forget this myself. When you're the Monarch, at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card. If whoever deals combat damage to you, they take the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you're the Monarch, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Again, flyers are kind of a problem. It's another way to deal with it, and this will spit out just as many 5/5 flyers as the Dragon Master Outcast. And if I'm the Monarch, I get to draw more cards. Not bad. Spark Double. 0/0. You may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker control, except it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on if it's a creature. It enters with an additional +1 or additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, and isn't legendary if that permanent is legendary. Again, another way to make a copy of Obeka that gets around the legendary rule. More Obekas, more upkeeps. I've said. Tidal Force. At the beginning of each upkeep, you may tap or untap target permanent. Now, this is one of the ones of the 3 forces I have in here, kind of on the fence about. This will allow me to untap my lands, untap creatures I've attacked with, and so on, but that's not a particularly strong effect. But if I've drawn a bunch of cards, untapping my lands will let me play what I drew. So, it's not really that bad. Tomb of Horrors Adventurer. It is a 4/4 when it enters the battlefield, take initiative. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. If you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice. Instead, you may choose new targets for the copies. So, this can do all kinds of stupid stuff. Because the spell is anything you cast. It can be creatures, instants, sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, etc. There are some really nutty cards that if I get more than 1 copy of them, the game's pretty much over. Twilight Prophet. It's a 2/4 with flying. It has Ascend. Sen says if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. So once you have those 10, you never lose city's blessing. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it in your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. I have some relatively pricey cards, CNC wise, in this deck, or CMC, I should say. Cost 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, deal 13 damage to each creature. If I'm behind, wipe the board. Chain reaction. It deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Another strong way to wipe the board. Necessity, honestly. I'm not running a lot of black board wipes in here because a lot of the black board wipes are kind of pricey mana-wise, and I don't want too many high CMC spells in the deck. Curse of Swine. One of my favorite ways to really mess with people. It costs X and 2 blue. Exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller creates a 2/2 green board creature token. Small price to pay for wiping like an Avacyn or a Darksteel Colossus, Blightsteel Colossus, etc. And all they get back in return is a 2/2 board. One of my favorite blue cards. Feed the Swarm. 2 mana. Destroy target creature or enchantment opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. This is in here just to get rid of problematic enchantments. Because in the 3 colors I'm playing, there's not a lot of good ways to deal with enchantments. It's either this or like Scour from Existence. Scour from Existence costs 7. If I have a choice between running Feed the Swarm or that, I'm running this kid's cheaper. Cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. So potentially I can cast this honestly during my first main phase and then rebound it during the extra upkeep phases from Obeka and get another copy. It kind of snowballs. Again, I'm not trying to kill people with commander damage. I can, but that's not the goal of the deck. Moving on to instants, we have the classics. Counterspell, counter target spell, self-explanatory. Cyclonic Rift. Yes, this is the art I have it. I opened it out. Don't control to its owner's hand, or you can overload it for 6 generic and a blue. Overload says you replace the instance of target with each. So for 6 colors in blue, return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Pretty much a killing blow, almost every time you do it. Disdainful Stroke, a counterspell that a lot of people don't run, and I don't blame them, but I've always found it to be very useful. A lot of commanders cost 4 or more, as do most board wipes, and a lot of other problematic threats. This allows you to counter it for the same manner as a counterspell, except you don't have to pay double blue. Go for the Throat, 1 generic and a blue, destroy target non-artifact creature. Need a way to deal with other problematic commanders. Cheap enough. As long as it's not black. Reality Shift, 1 generic and a blue. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. That player puts the top card of the library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2. If it's a creature card, it can be turned face up at any time for its mana cost. So this can backfire potentially, but more often than not, it's not going to. It's going to get a threat off the board, and all they're going to get out of it's 2/2. And whatever they manifest might have been something they really wanted to cast, but can't because it's not a creature. Resculpt. One generic and a blue. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So, again, this is more, again, for getting rid of the indestructible threats. Now, giving them 4/4 is a little bit more problematic than giving them a 2/2, but this hits artifacts as well. It's handy enough to have. One generic and 2 blue. Choose one. Counter all over spells. Switch each player's power and toughness to end of spell or until end of turn. Creatures can't be blocked this turn. So this is in here for a number of things. It makes Obeka unblockable for a turn. Somebody's trying to storm out by casting a bunch of spells. It when Court of Ambition enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the Monarch, instead each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. So this will make opponents empty their hand in a hurry, and once they're out of cards, they're going to start losing a crap load of life. Really good. Court of Cunning. When enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, any number of target players each mill 2 cards. If you're the Monarch, each of those players mills 10 cards instead. I'm not trying to win with mill, but this is just funny. Probably going to get me some hate. It's something I can take out if needed, but it's a really good upkeep trigger. Court of Embereth. When enters the battlefield, become the Monarch. Beginning of your upkeep, create a 3/1 red knight creature token. Then if you're the Monarch, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of creatures you control. So each upkeep, you get 1. Then you get 1, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Next upkeep, you get another 1, and it deals 2 to each opponent. So on for however many upkeeps I have. But that's only if you're in the Monarch. But again, even if I lose the Monarch before my next turn, sure, I'll only get the basic trigger on my first upkeep, but as soon as Obeka hits him again, I get the Monarch back. I then get the upkeeps, so it works out really well. This gives me lots of blockers and starts pinging the crap out of everybody. Court of Ire. At the beginning of your upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target. If you're the Monarch, it deals 7 damage instead. You want to talk about killing somebody in a hurry, or killing their biggest, creatures on the board, so on and so forth. Or it can hit planeswalkers too. So, good stuff. Alright, Court of Locthwain. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. If you're the Monarch until end of turn, you can cast a spell from amongst cards exiled with Court of Locthwain without paying its mana cost. These cards all spiked in price when Obeka was released. This is insane. Like, I've gotten this off with Obeka and just was playing tons of stuff off the top of my opponent's libraries. It was gross. Court of Antris. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose up to 1 target enchantment or artifact. If you're in the Monarch, you may create a token that's a copy of it. If you're not the Monarch, you can have Court of Antris become a copy of it, except it has this ability. So, this is something that could probably come out too, honestly. Maybe. This will allow me to... I could potentially create more copies of the courts, or somebody's got like a really good enchantment, like, Ristic Study, Smothering Tith, Doubling Season, stuff like that. I can get copies of it. Really strong, can get out of control really quick. Ill-Gotten Inheritance. At the beginning of your upkeep, Ill-Gotten Inheritance deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. You can pay 5 and a black and sacrifice it. It deals 4 damage to target opponent and you gain 4 life. This isn't as strong as the one creature that pings everybody for 1, but you gain life equal to all the damage dealt. It only